Have you ever felt a weight pressing on your chest that no one else could see? A weight so heavy that it changes the way you walk, the way you speak, even the way you dream. This is not a story about stones you can touch. It is about the stones carried inside the heart, the sharp edges of anger, the weight of betrayal, the heaviness of unforgiveness. Each one adds weight until the soul feels trapped, crushed, and weary. It's like carrying an invisible burden that grows heavier with every sunrise, every perceived slight, every memory of a past wound. This burden bends the back, clouds the mind, and slowly, insidiously, poisons the spirit, making every step an effort, every breath shallow, and every moment a struggle against an unseen force. In a valley where the morning mist rolled over green hills and the rivers sang quietly to the sun, a place where the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and blossoming life, there lived two men. Their homes were nestled close, their fields lay side by side, their families shared the same market square, and their lives outwardly appeared strikingly similar. They tilled the same rich soil, drank from the same clear springs, and watched the same sun set behind the ancient peaks. Yet, beneath this veneer of likeness, their hearts told two profoundly different stories, casting long, diverging shadows over their very existence. Adar was a man of impressive stature, his hands hardened by years of honest labor, his gaze often sharp but capable of warmth. He was known throughout the village for his formidable strength, his meticulous skill as a farmer, and a fierce, unyielding sense of justice. He was, by all accounts, respected. But beneath this outward composure, behind the lines etched into his weathered face, he carried a burden invisible to the eyes of others. Every insult, every betrayal, every broken promise, every word whispered in malice or slight, every perceived wrong became a tangible, heavy stone he meticulously tucked into an invisible sack within his chest. Day by day, year by year, the sack grew heavier, its invisible bulk pressing against his ribs, constricting his breath. His thoughts became sharper, his temper shorter, his nights restless, plagued by phantom weights and echoing grievances. Yet, in his twisted logic, he believed holding on to these stones proved his strength, demanded respect, and ensured that justice, though delayed, would somehow be served through his unyielding resentment. He saw his unforgiveness not as a cage, but as a shield, a testament to his suffering, a constant reminder to the world that he had been wronged and would not forget. Malak, his neighbor and closest friend since their childhood days spent exploring the same riverbanks and dreaming under the same vast sky, faced similar trials. He too had been wronged, insulted, even grievously betrayed by those he trusted. The world, in its inevitable imperfection, had dealt him blows just as it had Adar. But Malak carried no stones. When pain struck, he acknowledged it, he grieved. But then he chose to forgive. He chose to release the pain, to cut the invisible ties that bound him to the past. His steps were lighter, imbued with an effortless grace that belied his age. His nights were peaceful, untroubled by the ghosts of grievances. His mind was clear, unburdened by the relentless clamor of bitterness. Malak understood with a profound clarity that resentment was not a necessary consequence of suffering, but a choice to remain tethered to the very thing that sought to destroy his peace. And freedom, he knew, was found in laying down those stones others had placed in his path, rather than carrying them for a lifetime. He believed that the true measure of a man's strength lay not in how much he could carry, but in how much he could release. From the outside, the two men appeared remarkably alike. They rose with the sun, sowed seeds with diligent hands, tended their fields under the watchful eye of the sky, and performed the countless labors that sustained life in the valley. But inside, in the hidden chambers of their souls, the difference was stark, a chasm as wide and deep as any canyon. Adar's invisible sack of stones shaped his entire life, influencing every decision, every interaction, every waking and sleeping moment. His crops, though tended with skill, seemed to struggle, often yielding less than their potential. His sleep was a battlefield, restless and unrefreshing. His relationships, even with his beloved family, were subtly frayed by the constant undercurrent of his unresolved anger, a silent tension that permeated his home. Malak's fields, conversely, thrived with an almost miraculous abundance, his plants reaching skyward as if mirroring the lightness of his spirit. His family flourished, bathed in the warmth of his unfettered love. His heart was fertile, open, and free from the crushing weight of the stones that threatened to suffocate Adar's spirit. And this is where our story truly begins, not with the bounty of harvest or the sweat of daily labor, but with a profound, echoing question that every human heart, in every generation, must ultimately answer. How many stones will you carry before you choose to release them? How long will you allow the corrosive acid of resentment to define the rest of your life, to dictate your peace, to steal your joy, and to bind you to a past that has no claim on your present or future? This is not just a tale of two men. It is a parable for every soul burdened by the invisible weights of unaddressed pain. The story setup: the unseen chains. Adar's burden was invisible, yet its presence was unmistakable, a constant companion that never left his side. The very moment he stirred from sleep, before the first rays of dawn touched his window, he felt its omnipresent weight pressing down, a cold, heavy hand on his chest. It was a visceral reminder of every betrayal, every harsh word ever spoken against him, every injustice he had ever endured, replaying in his mind like a relentless, tormenting chorus. When he walked through the bustling village market, his senses, sharpened by his internal grievance, seemed to catch small slights in every casual gesture, to overhear veiled offense in every innocent tone. A neighbor's quick glance became a judgment, a merchant's hurried response a sign of disrespect. Each perceived injury, no matter how minor, no matter how unintentional, became another rough, jagged stone, meticulously added to his already overflowing sack. He carried them not just in his chest, but in the slump of his shoulders, the tension in his jaw, the subtle tremor in his hands. Malak, walking beside him one crisp morning, their boots kicking up dust on the path leading to their fields, noticed the way Adar's shoulders seemed to slump even more profoundly than usual, how his hands, calloused and strong, tightened around the wooden handle of his hoe until his knuckles gleamed white. The early sun, usually a source of renewed energy, seemed to weigh Adar down. "The ground seems heavier for you today, old friend," Malak said quietly, his voice a gentle ripple in the morning stillness, devoid of judgment. He glanced at Adar, his eyes calm and full of a deep, abiding empathy that Adar often mistook for weakness. Adar grunted, a sound of weary resignation, his gaze fixed on the uneven soil before them, refusing to meet Malak's eyes. He dug his hoe into the earth with unnecessary force, as if trying to excavate the very burdens from the ground itself. "It is not the ground that is heavy, Malak. It is the world itself. A world that is unjust. A world where people do not care for the good. They take, they deceive, they wound, and they forget. But I do not forget." He spoke with a fierce conviction, as if by stating the truth of his pain, he could somehow lessen its grip. "They walk away unburdened, while I bear the scars of their actions. This weight, it is the only true witness." Malak shook his head slowly, a sigh escaping his lips, his eyes remaining calm, filled with a sorrowful understanding. "It is not the world that weighs you down, Adar. The world is what it is. It is what you carry inside you, the memories you choose to cling to, the grievances you nurture like seedlings in your heart that truly burdens you." He paused, allowing the words to hang in the air between them, knowing their truth was sharp. Adar frowned, a deep furrow appearing between his brows, his jaw tightening further. "What I carry is mine. It is proof. Proof that the pain exists, that it was real, that it cut deep. Proof that I have not been wronged in silence, that their actions did not simply vanish into the wind. Proof that I matter, that my suffering has meaning, that I am not invisible." He clutched at his chest, an involuntary gesture, as if to secure the invisible sack. To let it go, to forgive, That would be to say it never happened, to say their wrongs were nothing, to diminish my own pain. His voice had risen, a hint of desperation creeping into his tone. He genuinely believed that retaining the pain was a form of self-preservation, a way to protect himself from further hurt by never forgetting the past. Malak did not reply immediately. He understood the profound depth of Adar's misconception. He knew the lesson could not be taught with mere words alone, however eloquently spoken. It had to be realized, experienced, earned through suffering and choice. Yet, he spoke gently, his voice still low, as if sharing a sacred secret. Adar, the stones you carry do not honor the wrong done to you. They do not punish the wrongdoer. They do not bring you justice. Instead, they bind you to the very act you despise. They are chains forged not by your enemies, but by your own hands, tethering you to a past that has no claim on your present. They take from you what no one else can truly steal: your peace, your health, your clarity of mind, your very joy. You believe you hold on to them for strength, but they are draining you of all strength. One day, my friend, if you do not lay them down, the sheer weight will crush you. And then, only then, will you see that every single stone, every grievance you clung to, was ultimately your own choice, your own self-imposed prison. Adar gritted his teeth, his grip on the hoe tightening until his knuckles were white. He wanted to dismiss Malak's words as naive, as foolish sentimentality, as the rambling of a man who simply didn't understand true suffering. But even as he silently argued with Malak, even as he conjured up fresh images of past slights to fortify his resolve, the familiar, suffocating heaviness in his chest, the dull ache in his back, the cloudiness in his mind, reminded him with brutal honesty that they were true. The bitter irony tormented him. He feared release as much as he feared the weight itself. For what would he be without his grievances? Who would he be if he was not the wronged man? The burden had become his identity, and the thought of shedding it, of stepping into an unfamiliar lightness, was as terrifying as it was enticing. Rising conflict and tension. The slow decline weeks bled into months, and the valley moved through its seasons, but Adar remained frozen in his internal winter. His burden, far from diminishing, grew exponentially, each new slight, each perceived injustice, adding layers of concrete to his invisible sack. He moved slowly, his gait becoming a shuffle, his back bent not by the field's labor, but by the relentless, crushing weight he carried within. His once strong hands now trembled, not from exertion, but from a pervasive internal tremor that seemed to shake his very core. Each night, as the stars wheeled in silent majesty across the vast, inky canvas of the sky, he lay awake, his mind a relentless projector. He replayed every betrayal, every cutting word, every moment of perceived disrespect, sharpening his memories, honing the edges of his bitterness until they gleamed with a malevolent light. Sleep, once a comforting balm, now abandoned him almost entirely. He would lie there, staring at the unseen ceiling, his body aching, his mind a frantic, desperate battlefield of anger, regret, and a profound, gnawing sense of injustice. The quiet hum of the night was replaced by the cacophony of his own internal torments. Malak, in stark contrast, navigating the very same valley, facing the very same human imperfections and inevitable wrongs, continued to walk a different path. When insulted by a careless word, he offered a gentle smile. When deceived by a desperate soul, he released the pain, understanding that the deceiver was perhaps more bound than the deceived. He did not ignore the hurt, but he chose not to dwell in it. His nights were full of deep, restorative rest, his breathing even and calm. His mornings were full of clarity, his mind unclouded, ready to face the day's challenges with quiet resolve. His fields, nourished by a heart free from bitterness, thrived, bursting with vibrant green, producing bountiful harvests that seemed to defy the capriciousness of the weather. His family flourished in the warmth of his patient and understanding spirit, their laughter echoing freely from his home. His heart, unburdened, thrived, radiating a quiet joy that was almost tangible. Neighbors, ever observant in the close-knit community of the valley, began to notice the stark divergence. Whispers followed Adar like a shadow, whispers about his increasingly harsh temper, his sharp, cutting words, his perpetually scowling countenance. They began to openly compare him to Malak, who, despite enduring his own share of life's unfairness, still smiled with genuine warmth, offered a helping hand without hesitation, and spoke words of encouragement rather than complaint. Children, innocent and perceptive, began to instinctively mimic Malak's calm patience in their games, while elders, wise with the accumulated wisdom of years, increasingly sought his counsel, drawn to the quiet wisdom and serene peace that radiated from him. The entire village slowly began to recognize, with growing clarity, that the freedom born of forgiveness created something far more profound than mere inner peace. It nurtured the entire community, weaving a stronger, more resilient social fabric. Adar's negativity was a palpable weight, a chill in the air, while Malak's presence was like a warm, invigorating breeze. One particularly sweltering evening, as the sun dipped below the western ridges, painting the sky in hues of fiery orange and bruised purple, Adar sat by his wilting crops. His field, once a source of pride, now looked parched and neglected, a stark reflection of the dryness within his own soul. His hands gripped his knees, his jaw tight, his shoulders hunched in defeat. He was utterly exhausted, not from the day's labor, for he had found little energy to work, but from the relentless, soul-crushing weight he carried, a burden that never lessened, even in repose. As dusk deepened, Malak passed by, returning from his own abundantly thriving fields, greeting neighbors with genuine warmth, his voice carrying the sound of light-hearted laughter as he played a quick game of chase with a group of delighted children. Adar watched him, a knot of bitter envy twisting in his gut. He simply could not comprehend it. How could someone endure the same betrayals, the same hardships, perhaps even worse, and remain so completely unburdened, so full of light and life? The heaviness in his chest pressed deeper, now accompanied by a sharp, piercing pain that felt as if an iron band were tightening around his heart. His mind raced, a dizzying carousel of old hurts and fresh anxieties. And then, a truly horrifying realization began to settle upon him, like a suffocating shadow. He had carried this immense, debilitating load for years, for decades, without a single moment of true relief, without a flicker of hope for release. The insidious nature of his self-imposed prison began to reveal itself, not as a source of strength, but as a slow, agonizing death. He was trapped, not by his enemies, but by his own unwavering refusal to let go, by his own stubborn attachment to a pain that was now consuming him from the inside out. He yearned for freedom, but the chains of his own making felt inextricably fused to his very being. The weight was no longer just a burden, it was a torture, and he was the architect of his own torment. The turning point, the blight and the unexpected grace. The morning of revelation arrived, not with a dramatic thunderclap or a celestial sign, but quietly, with a dense, unnatural mist rolling over the valley, a mist unlike any seen before. It clung to the trees, shrouded the fields, and carried with it a strange metallic scent. Adar, despite his crushing exhaustion, had risen earlier than usual, driven by a desperate, fleeting hope that perhaps, just perhaps, if he worked harder, if he forced himself to ignore the pain, he could salvage something from his increasingly barren patch of land. He carried a small bundle of thinly harvested, withered grain across his field, his muscles screaming in protest. When suddenly, without warning, his knees buckled beneath him. He didn't trip. It was as if the invisible sack of stones, swollen with years of accumulated resentment, anger, and bitterness, had finally, catastrophically, collapsed with him, pulling him down into the cold, damp soil. A searing, agonizing pain radiated through his chest, sharp and immediate, mirroring the internal anguish he had lived with for so long. His breath caught in his throat, shallow and ragged, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He lay there, utterly defeated, unable to move, consumed by a pain that was both physical and profoundly spiritual. Just then, Malak, who had been inspecting his own fields, appeared through the thinning mist. He saw Adar fall and rushed to his side without a moment's hesitation, his face etched with genuine concern. Kneeling down in the wet earth, oblivious to the dirt, he placed a steady, comforting hand on Adar's shoulder. The warmth of Malak's touch, usually something Adar stiffly recoiled from, now felt like a lifeline in his moment of complete collapse. "It is not the sun, nor the soil, nor the labor that bends you, Adar," Malak said, his voice quiet but firm, imbued with the ancient wisdom of the valley. "It is the weight you carry yourself. It has finally consumed you." Adar shook his head weakly, tears of pain and frustration stinging his eyes, his voice a barely audible tremor. "But if I forgive?" He gasped, the words tumbling out, raw and unbidden. "It feels like the pain is meaningless. It's as if what was done to me, the hurt I endured, simply ceases to exist. How can I honor that pain? How can I honor myself if I release it? It would be to surrender." Malak's gaze was unwavering, his eyes holding a profound, ancient knowing. "Forgiveness does not erase what was done, Adar. It does not justify injustice. It does not mean you forget the lessons learned. What happened, happened. But it removes the power that wrong has over you. It cuts the invisible tether. You do not forgive for their sake. You forgive to save yourself. You forgive to break the chains that bind you to a past that no longer serves you. Every stone you release, Adar, lightens your heart, clears your mind, and frees your body from the insidious prison you have built around yourself." As Malak spoke, a chilling phenomenon began to unfold around them. The strange mist intensified, and a visible, sickly yellow-green mold began to rapidly spread across the leaves of Adar's crops. What had been wilting now shriveled and blackened before their eyes, as if an unseen fire were consuming them from within. It was a blight, a pestilence of unprecedented speed and virulence sweeping through the valley's grains. Adar stared, horrified, as his entire livelihood, already teetering, was utterly annihilated in a matter of minutes. His spirit broke. The physical pain in his chest intensified, a mirror to the devastation of his land. He felt utterly, completely ruined. Malak, however, stood up swiftly, his eyes scanning not just Adar's field, but the horizon. His own crops, though touched by the mist, showed a remarkable, inexplicable resilience. While some leaves browned, the core of the stalks remained strong, less affected than Adar's, less affected than any other in the valley. Malak, unburdened by internal chaos, his mind clear and sharp, had been diligently studying the subtle shifts in the land, the behavior of insects, the changes in the air currents. He had, weeks ago, observed a particular species of rare, resilient fern growing near an ancient, undisturbed spring, a fern known in Old Valley lore for its detoxifying properties when crushed and diluted. While others had dismissed it as superstition, Malak, with his clear mind, had experimented, prepared a simple, pungent poultice, and applied it to his own fields as a preventative measure. He had even tried to mention it to Adar, who had scoffed, too consumed by his bitterness to listen. Now, as the blight consumed Adar's last hope, Malak made a decision. He ran to his own storehouse, gathered large bundles of the crushed fern and a vat of water, and returned to Adar, his movements urgent but purposeful. He didn't just offer advice, he started working. "Adar, we must act now," he commanded, his voice devoid of any "I told you so." He began mixing the solution, explaining its preparation, its application, its lore, and then came the profound, shocking act of grace. Malak, who had endured Adar's coldness, his barbed words, his unyielding animosity for years, began to apply the solution not just to his own struggling crops, but to Adar's ravaged, dying field. He worked with a fierce, selfless dedication, pouring his energy into saving the very man who had resented him most. He didn't ask for payment, didn't demand an apology, he simply gave. Adar watched him, lying helpless on the ground, as Malak, with swift, practiced movements, poured the pungent liquid onto the blackened stalks. He saw not pity, but genuine, unconditional help. He saw a man who, despite every reason to let Adar fail, was actively, tirelessly saving him from utter ruin. This selfless act of compassion, this profound demonstration of unconditional grace in the face of his own desperate need, shattered Adar's stubborn resistance. It was a moment of overwhelming clarity, a bolt of lightning striking the very core of his being. The weight in his chest, so long a familiar torment, suddenly felt alien, suffocating, absurd. He saw that Malak's strength lay not in holding on to wrongs, but in releasing them and extending grace. Tears, hot and cleansing, welled in Adar's eyes, blurring his vision. For the first time, not just in concept, but in the raw, aching depth of his soul, he truly understood. The crushing weight, the pain in his chest, the bitterness that had consumed him. It had not been a punishment inflicted by the world. It had been a choice. His choice. A choice he had made, reaffirmed daily, and clung to with a death grip. Trembling, his body still weak but his spirit beginning to stir, he reached into the invisible sack, not with his physical hand, but with the newfound resolve of his spirit. He seized a stone, the largest one, the one representing his oldest, deepest resentment, perhaps even the resentment he held against Malak for his perceived ease of life. He pulled it out, imagining its rough edges, its cold weight, and with a guttural sob that tore from his throat, he let it drop. The sound echoed not in the physical valley, but in the depths of his soul, a sound like chains breaking, shattering the walls of his self-made prison. One stone down, one chain broken, one step toward an unfamiliar, terrifying, yet utterly exhilarating freedom. The blight might have destroyed his crops, but Malak's grace had destroyed his bitterness. Resolution and moral, the unburdened soul. As the stones began to fall one by one, released from the invisible sack within Adar's chest, a profound transformation began to ripple through his entire being. It was not an instant, magical eradication of pain, but a deliberate, conscious act, repeated with each memory of a past wrong. He started with the smallest, most recent slights, then moved to the deeper, older wounds. The neighbor who had cheated him years ago on a trade deal, the friend who had spread false words about him in the marketplace, eroding his reputation, family members whose careless remarks had cut deeply, leaving wounds that festered for decades. With each act of conscious forgiveness, with each whispered release of a name or an event, his chest seemed to loosen, as if a vice had been slowly, incrementally, unscrewed. The suffocating pressure eased. His breathing became deeper, fuller. His mind, once a constant battlefield of recrimination and regret, began to clear, its agitated waters settling into a calm, reflective pool. The dull ache in his bones, the persistent fatigue, the chronic tension in his shoulders, all began to recede. His energy, long dormant, returned in a steady, invigorating surge. His posture, which had been bent and stooped for years, slowly, almost imperceptibly began to straighten. He walked taller, his head held high, not with arrogance, but with a newfound quiet dignity. Sleep, that elusive and longed-for balm, finally returned, deep and peaceful, untroubled by the demons of his past. He awoke each morning feeling truly refreshed, ready to face the day not with dread, but with a quiet anticipation. And his fields, the very ones that had been on the brink of ruin from the blight, now began to respond to his renewed energy and focus. The plants, though initially ravaged, showed a surprising capacity for recovery, reflecting the vibrant, resilient life that was stirring within his own heart. His meticulous care, fueled by an unburdened spirit, allowed them to flourish, bursting with life, producing harvests that rivaled and sometimes even surpassed those of Malak's fields. Relationships, long frayed by his bitterness, began to mend. His family, who had tiptoed around his volatile moods, now found a softer, more approachable father and husband. Laughter, long absent from his home, was restored, echoing warmly through his rooms. And the pure, unadulterated joy of life, a joy he had not felt in what seemed like an eternity, was not just restored, but blossomed anew, brighter and more precious for having been lost and found. He found himself whistling as he worked, humming old tunes, and even seeking out conversation with neighbors he had previously avoided. He realized, with a profound, humbling clarity, that forgiveness is not about freeing others. It is, first and foremost, about freeing oneself. It is a radical act of self-liberation. Scripture confirms this timeless truth, echoing through the ages like a powerful sermon delivered from a mountaintop. Jesus, in his profound wisdom, taught us, "Forgive, and you will be forgiven." Luke 6:37. He didn't say, "Forgive, and they will apologize," or "Forgive, and justice will be served as you wish." He linked forgiveness directly to our own state of being, to our own liberation. The Apostle Paul, deeply understanding the human condition, urged, "Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry." Ephesians 4:26. These are not mere suggestions, beloved, not gentle nudges from a distant deity. No, these are keys to unlocking clarity, to experiencing profound joy, and to discovering an abiding peace that surpasses all understanding. They are divine instructions for human flourishing, a roadmap to living a life unchained. Adar understood now, with every fiber of his being, that resentment is not a shield. It is a poison, slow-acting, insidious, consuming from within. It binds you to the very person or event you wish to escape. Forgiveness, conversely, is the antidote. It is the powerful medicine that purifies the soul, cleanses the mind, and heals the body. Every single stone he released brought not vindication to others, but profound restoration to himself. His capacity for love, for empathy, for experiencing the simple beauty of existence expanded exponentially as the walls of his bitterness crumbled. He became a living testament to the power of grace, both received and extended. Psychological and scientific layer, the biochemistry of freedom. Beloved, what Adar experienced was not merely a spiritual revelation, though it was profoundly that. Science, in its tireless pursuit of truth, echoes this ancient wisdom, providing a tangible, measurable confirmation of what prophets and wise men have known for millennia. Resentment, that insidious, gnawing bitterness, triggers a chronic stress response within the human body. It's not just a feeling, it's a biochemical cascade. Your body is flooded with stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. Imagine a constant low-level fight-or-flight state, day in and day out. This continuous chemical assault erodes your sleep, preventing deep, restorative slumber. It clouds your clarity of thought, making decision-making difficult and logical reasoning elusive. And critically, it significantly damages your overall health, weakening your immune system, elevating blood pressure, increasing inflammation, and contributing to a host of chronic diseases. Bitterness, my friends, is not just an emotion. It physically tightens muscles, creating knots of tension in the neck, shoulders, and jaw, contributing to headaches and chronic pain. It literally clouds the mind, impairing cognitive function and narrowing your perspective. It burdens the heart, not just metaphorically, but physically, contributing to cardiovascular strain. It is a slow, self-inflicted poison. But here's the miracle, confirmed by neuroscience. Forgiveness, that deliberate act of releasing the past, has a profound and immediate impact on your physiology. When you genuinely choose to forgive, the amygdala, the brain's alarm center responsible for fear and anger, relaxes its grip. The hyperactive neural pathways associated with anger and rumination begin to weaken, like overgrown weeds withering away. Simultaneously, new, healthier pathways of empathy and peace begin to strengthen, flourishing like fresh springs. Consider the measurable shifts. Blood pressure lowers, easing the strain on your cardiovascular system. Energy levels, once depleted by the constant fight against internal demons, visibly increase. Neurotransmitters, the very chemical messengers of your brain, begin to flood your system with calm, satisfaction, and even joy. Oxytocin, the bonding hormone, is released, fostering feelings of connection and well-being. The immune system, no longer under constant attack from cortisol, strengthens, making you more resilient to illness. Your digestive system, previously disrupted by stress, begins to function optimally. Malak understood this, not just intellectually, but intuitively. He knew that peace, robust health, and unbridled joy were not simply spiritual rewards of releasing resentment. They were practical, tangible, undeniable outcomes. They were the very fruits of an unburdened life. When Adar, finally awakened, began the arduous but liberating process of forgiveness, the change was not just mental. It was immediate and profoundly physical. His mind cleared, the fog lifting as if after a long, oppressive storm. The crushing weight in his chest miraculously lightened, allowing him to breathe freely, deeply, perhaps for the first time in decades. His body, once a vessel of constant pain and fatigue, began to strengthen, to reclaim its natural vitality. Freedom, he discovered, was not an abstract concept. It was real, it was tangible, and it was utterly life-changing. It was felt in every refreshed breath, every clear thought, every pain-free movement, every moment of genuine, unburdened joy. Closing impact, the invitation to freedom. Now, beloved listener, I ask you, not as a judge, but as a fellow traveler on this winding path of life, to reflect deeply. What stones are you carrying? Whose names are etched into their rough, unforgiving surfaces? Is it a parent's harsh word from childhood, a sibling's betrayal, a friend's broken trust, a partner's infidelity, a colleague's slight, or even a systemic injustice that has left you feeling wounded and powerless? Perhaps it is a stone you carved yourself, a grievance against your own past mistakes, your own perceived failures. Understand this truth, etched into the very fabric of existence. Forgiveness is not weakness. No, it is, in fact, the ultimate display of strength. It does not excuse injustice. It does not condone wrongdoing. It does not mean forgetting the lessons learned. What it does, with unparalleled power, is free you. It frees you from the invisible chains that bind you to the past, from the torment of reliving old hurts, from the slow, corrosive poison of bitterness. It gives you back your present, your future, and most importantly, your very self. Imagine, just for a moment, the profound relief of dropping those stones, one by one. The tension that has been a constant companion in your shoulders, your jaw, your gut, begins to melt away. Clarity returns to your mind, like morning sunlight breaking through the densest fog. A surge of energy, long suppressed by the burden, begins to flow through your veins, and a deep, pervasive peace, a peace that no external circumstance can disrupt, spreads through every fiber of your being, calming the storm within. That sound, that feeling, that choice is not just relief, it is freedom. It is the sound of your soul breathing again. I urge you, with all the love and conviction in my heart, share this story. Not just with words, but with your transformed life. Let your liberation be a beacon for others. Forgive, my dear ones, not for their sake, but for your own. The stones you carry are yours to release, and yours alone. No one else can lift them for you, but you possess the power to lay them down. In letting go, your soul breathes again, deeply and freely. Your mind clears, allowing you to see the beauty and possibility that have always been there, obscured by the weight. Your spirit is renewed, reborn into a life of lightness and joy. Lay down your stones today, dear friend. Lay them down at the foot of the cross. Lay them down in the quiet solitude of your heart. Lay them down in the liberating act of choice. And as you do, step, unburdened, into the magnificent, vibrant life you were always meant to live. The harvest of forgiveness awaits. If this story spoke to you, comment the word forgiveness. Share it with someone who might need it, and tell us how forgiveness has changed your life. Your story could inspire others. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more uplifting content.